You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we are live on the network service of the NTA. Now, as a prompt for our conversation this morning, which is on issues in the Nigerian economy, let's listen in to this backgrounder by our correspondent, Ekene Undulwe.
Nigeria's economy entered a recession in 2020, reversing 3 years of recovery due to fall in crude oil prices on account of falling global demand and containment measures to fight the spread of COVID-19. The COVID-19 containment measures mainly affected aviation, tourism, hospitality, manufacturing, and trade. To pull Nigeria out of recession, the federal government came up with a National Economic Sustainability Plan in response to the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan seeks to provide fiscal and monetary stimulus package, including support to private businesses, and propose a clear-cut strategy to keep existing jobs and create opportunities for new ones. So far, a huge number of Nigerians have benefited from the federal government's efforts. Under the MSME's Survival Fund, over 270,000 beneficiaries have received payroll support payments, while artisans and transport grants are currently being disbursed. Other aspects of the Economic Sustainability Plan include the solar home system aimed at connecting 5 million households in off-grid and underserved communities to electricity, as well as the social housing program, which aims to support 1.5 million Nigerians to acquire low-cost houses. This lofty plan towards economic growth is, however, facing multiple numbers of challenges, including inflation, multiple exchange rates, and rising debt profile. The Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, shows an increase to 18.17% in March 2021. This is 0.82 percentage points higher than the rates recorded in February 2021 at 17.33%. Food inflation, a closely watched index, spiked to 22.95% from 21.79% recorded in the previous month. The multiple exchange rate system comes with its own problems of currency round-tripping, distorted price discovery, and distortion in production costs. Nigeria's rising debt profile is also a cause of growing concern among local economists. Data from the Debt Management Office shows that Nigeria's total debt as of third quarter of 2020 stood at 32.2 trillion naira. How will Nigeria surmount the challenges of double-digit inflation? Will the country achieve the desired economic growth in spite of these challenges? These and more are questions that will be engaging our guests on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria.
And to discuss the topic first, I would like to introduce here in the studio the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Hajiya Zainab Ahmed. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you very much, Ramadan Kareem.
All right, Honorable Minister, delight to have you with us on the program today. We're also going to have two other guests who will be joining us for this conversation. Of course, we'll take the minister for some 25-30 minutes and then thereafter invite the other guests. They are already seated in our Benin Network Center and also in Kano. They are regular guests whenever we are discussing economic issues. In Benin, Professor Mike Obadan. Professor Mike Obadan is a professor of economics and a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank. Prof, delight to have you this morning.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. It's my very great pleasure to be with you.
All right, thanks. And from our Kano Network Center, we have Professor Yushua Ango, another of our regulars. He's a professor of finance and entrepreneurship, as well as dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Kaduna State University. Yushua Ango, delight to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Kingsley. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. Once again, Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
How is the Nigerian economy doing?
The Nigerian economy is stabilizing from the recession that we just exited in the fourth quarter of 2020. These are very difficult, challenging times, especially in the fiscal space, because revenues are low and the demand for expenditure is very high and continues to increase, understandably, because we have to keep intervening to make sure that the health COVID-19 pandemic is contained, as well as the economic impact that it has caused, which includes, in our case in Nigeria, the crash of crude oil price really hit us very hard in terms of revenue. So we have very low revenue, we have very high expenditures, and what we've done so far is to try to just provide some stability, to make sure salaries are paid, that pensions are received every month, that we send funds to the judiciary and the legislature, that we meet our debt service obligations. So that's what we're doing. But it also means that we have had to borrow more than we had planned before the COVID-19 started, because we need to still continue to invest in infrastructure. Using our capital budget, we borrow to invest in key infrastructure projects such as roads, rail, airports, seaports, and several other investments that are required in health and in education, and upgrading the social standards and quality of life of our people. So we have, and Nigeria is not unique, as several countries of the world went into recession. Almost every country in the world have had to borrow more than they planned. It means we expanded our deficit very, very fast in 2020. And 2021 is a year that we see as a year of recovery, that the recovery will be stable. And so that's our main aim, that we don't slide back, that we continue to grow on an incremental basis. Our projection is that 2020, we do hope, and this is very, very ambitious, that we'll reach a growth of 3%. Even though IMF, in 2021, I beg your pardon, 2021, thanks for the correction. But some of the multilateral institutions are putting us at 2.5%. Again, it's very difficult times. And I can explain to you how difficult it is, not just for the federal government, but also for the states. We see increasing reductions in our FAAC revenues. FAAC revenues are the revenues that we pull together every month, revenues that are collected for both oil and as well as non-oil sectors, collection efforts of NMPC, FIRS, customs, and several revenue collecting agencies. So FAAC reduces, and whenever FAAC reduces, it's a very difficult situation for us. So in the past 1 year, we have tried to fall back on some specific accounts that are meant to be savings, that when you have such a situation, you fall back on and you pull some resources and arguments. So we take funds based on Mr. President's approval, either from excess crude or stabilization account, or in some cases, the President even approved for us to take funds from NLNG dividend. In the month of, just the last month, in the month of March, we had a shortfall of FAAC that is almost about 50 billion. And we didn't have enough accrued in any of those accounts other than some 8.5 billion that we took from excess, from exchange rate differential account. So we added that and we ended up with a FAAC of 605 billion. An average FAAC that is healthy for us is 650 billion naira. So it means we had a shortfall of about 50 billion. The states, to be honest, wanted us to go borrow from the central bank to augment FAAC. So we had a FAAC that ran through 3 days because we couldn't agree, but we resisted doing that. So we didn't borrow from the central bank. We insisted that the FAAC should be shared as is. When we had buffers, we borrowed to augment it, but we didn't. So we just thought everybody should go back and scale back and rearrange how they managed their affairs to be able to live within what we had. So it was very surprising for us when we had a sitting governor saying that CBN had printed money for FAAC. That was very, very unfortunate because it is not true. The FAAC was 605 billion. The FAAC information is published, so you can see the general revenue contributed by each of the agencies. That is what we shared. The states will have wanted us to borrow and augment, but we didn't do that. And we will make sure that we don't have to do that, because it's time that all of us now need to just go back and do more. A lot of the states are trying to do more in terms of increasing the performance of the internally generated revenue, but it's difficult to do that at a time when growth is very, very slow. So we do understand that. And going forward, what we have been doing from 2019 to date in the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is a plan that we have put in place to grow revenue. Our revenues have been growing, but because the expenditure is growing at a pace that is much faster than revenue growth, the impact is not seen. In the year just past 2020, despite the challenges, our revenue performance was 77%. We never had a revenue performance of 77% over the past 10 years. In 2018, the performance was about 52%. In 2019, it was 52%. And then in 2020, it was 70% performance of revenue over expenditure. So the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative was designed by our ministry and launched to enhance our capacity to generate revenue. In the SRGF, we call it the SRGF for short, we define things like we need to be doing annual finance bills to incrementally adjust the fiscal space so that we have improvements in collections on an ongoing basis. We put measures how we can check the efficiency of tax collections and custom revenue collections of the Nigerian Customs Service. We put in place measures that we needed to automate the collection processes of the FRS and the Nigerian Customs. These are things that we have done. We also made a provision that we need to increase VAT, and we increased the VAT over the process. We made a commitment in the SRGR that we were going to return the budget year from January to December. So these things are things that we're following carefully, systematically, and seeing results and ticking off and improving. We're currently in the process of revising the SRGI to refine it, because the dynamics when we designed it in 2019 has changed. So we're revising it now to make sure that it is more effective and that it serves the current purpose for which we intended. Our target, even in the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan and the new plan, is to reach a revenue to GDP of 15%. We are currently at around 8% revenue to GDP. And to reach 15%, it means we have to triple the rate of revenue, both at the national as well as the federal level. So it's a difficult operating environment, but we are not alone. We continuously interact with our neighbors within the African region. We have regular meetings of finance ministers. We meet with development partners such as multilateral institutions such as the World Bank and IMS. We continue to look at what is the practice, what have others done that we can also do, and what is it that we must do in the Nigerian context that continues to provide improvements. We know it's hard for people, especially when PMS price goes up. It pushes inflation. So we're struggling with food inflation, and inflation rate is high now. But we're seeing a situation whereby in the next 2 months it will plateau and begin to decline because the base effect has worn up. So I'm just saying that there is hope, that the economy is on the right path of growth, that things are difficult, but they're not going to be difficult forever. Maybe we'll still have to take some tougher measures. Like not too long ago, we adjusted import duties for vehicles. It wasn't a popular decision, but it was something we had to do, and we did it. And whatever we have to do in the fiscal space, working together with the trade authorities to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has come into effect, and with the monetary authorities, we'll continue to work on in those lines to improve the economy, to provide better life a better condition of life and livelihoods for our people. And we also continue to vigorously implement the Economic Sustainability Plan. It's now our guiding document. In the whole of the economy, all ministers, all sectors are involved in that, and everybody has their own defined roles, their targets, and we're all working towards those targets.
Okay, you've painted quite a good picture and hope for Nigerians that the economy is getting better amidst COVID-19 and recession around the world. But you were quoted recently as saying that, and I'm quoting you, the nation's debt profile was still within sustainable limit. So the question is now, what action or inaction can take us out of sustainable limit in terms of our debt profile, and what are the strategies to service our debts as we go on?
So very recently, we redesigned or updated, and renewed our medium-term debt management strategy. So we have a 4-year strategy. It expired in 2020. We renewed it and went to FAAC for approval. And the strategy is implemented vigorously, and that's what we've been doing in the past, and that's what we continue to do. So we borrow to fund government's deficit after taking into account the revenues that are generated and any other financing items such as disposal of government assets or recoveries that are made. So any deficits that remain, we raise them. What we make sure to do is to make sure we're raising funds that are concessional, so the interest rates are very, very low, and we're raising funds both locally and internationally. So the new debt management strategy has approved a ratio of borrowing that is higher in terms of proportion, domestic, and lower foreign. Why? So that we took into account the effect of exchange rate differential. So when your exchange rate goes up, your borrowing is in foreign currency, your debt automatically goes up. So we continue to check those balances. We look for long tenors so that the repayment is eased off. So our average portfolio now is targeted to be a minimum of 10 years, both combined domestic and local. But we have been getting loans that are from multilateral institutions that are 25 years with 5 years moratorium, with interest rates that are 1%, 1.5%. So those are loans that we're using to deploy infrastructure that is needed now, because that is what we require to grow this economy on a sustainable basis. So we're borrowing, but we're using the funds that we borrow responsibly. And at the end of the day, the assets that we are deploying are seen by people. You can see the road constructions that are going on. You can see the upgraded airports. You can see the second Niger bridge. You can see the rail lines that are already being put into effect with ultra-modern stations. So that's what we're borrowing for. And these borrowings are important for us to do now. We can't wait and do this later.
I will return presently to the debt management approach that the government has adopted. But we'll take advantage of your presence here so that we'll clarify this. And I'm sure you know that a lot of heat has been generated by the comments attributed to the Edo State Governor, and then part of the clarification that you have made. It appears from what you have said that there was indeed a shortfall in the FAAC revenues available for distribution to the tiers of government. And how to bridge that shortfall then was the issue. Some governors said, look, borrow, but the federal government, through the president, said, look, don't borrow. And somehow the matter was resolved. Edo State Governor was quoted as saying, look, there was indeed borrowing through ways and means, popularly referred to as printing of money. But there was also the most substantive issue which the governor raised, and to which you have also alluded, that the shortfall is indicative of the headwinds ahead, that the economy is in some turbulent season, and therefore it's an opportunity or an occasion for all of us to realize that it couldn't possibly be business as usual. What has not been addressed would appear to be, look, what needs to be done in addressing, apart from saying, look, you are flying and there is turbulence in the air, and from the flight deck, the captain says, look, fasten your seatbelt. What would that mean for us as a nation to say, fasten your seatbelt at this time that we are in some period of turbulence?
So as a nation, and that means both the federal and the state government. And local governments, we must review our expenditure patterns. We're just spending too much and we're not generating enough. So even at the federal level, people are carrying on as if there's no problem. But there is a problem. We have very limited revenue and we have to use whatever money we borrow very, very wisely. We must cut down on expenditure. Our wage bill at the federal level is huge. It's very, very large. And the president has directed you cannot disengage staff, so you have to live with that. So if there is anything that we can defer or we can reuse or things that can wait, we should do those things, because we can't expect that anything we want to do, we should just be able to do it. The finance should just find the money for people to do those things. So at the state level, it's the same. Because when we interact with colleagues, the commissioners of finance, it's the same problem that everybody has. People are not, it's as if we haven't got the message. There's a fiscal problem and we have to do things differently. We have to force some very, very significant reforms. We pulled back fuel subsidies. We started deregulating the electricity tariff so that tariff is put in different categories and you pay higher when you get more hours of power. We pull back fuel subsidies so that money from the subsidy can be used for other things that are more developmental for the society. But unfortunately, we have battles with labor right now. We have battles with labor right now because we opened up the price and allowed the market to dictate the price. What that means is as the crude oil price globally goes up, the subsidy, the PMS price also goes up. So when people say, you should be happy the crude oil price is going up, I'm saying no. For us, it's a double-edged sword. Because once labor has started complaining, and somehow they were listened to, and we stood still at 165 naira, it means we're incurring expenses. It means NNPC has to bridge the gap. If we allow the market to be fully deregulated, it means the PMS price will rise. And then you have to, as government, you have to start thinking, what does that mean to the lives of people? Because inflation will go up, and then people will have hardships. So we're really struggling. The fiscal space is very, very, very tight right now.
I don't know. Well, Juma, this is a point that we have encountered on Good Morning Nigeria. I am not asking you to disclose perhaps any drastic measures that might be necessary in the circumstance of the current fiscal pressure, say at the federal level. Well, there was the agitation for a new minimum wage, so we had the new minimum wage. And then it had a knock-on effect in terms of the so-called relativity. So you had minimum wage 30,000, everybody from level 2 to level 17, you had an adjustment. Now we are saying that, look, we're having pressures because money is not coming in. How do we do that? Minister of Labor, usually that is also his regular seat when it comes to Good Morning Nigeria, has told us that there are no fewer than 12, at least a dozen wage structures. Yes. And from time to time, you hear of strikes and MOUs not honored and so on and so forth. They paralyze whatever sector, and once there's paralysis, productivity goes down, the economy cannot grow. How are we going to, I mean, I put it to you as a government, how are you going to deal with all of these issues? You have the new minimum wage and the consequences to grapple with. You have a dozen wage structures. Persons earning all kinds of fantastic salaries and still more agitation, and then work stoppages. And we want to grow the economy at minimum of 3%. How do we do that?
So what the president has done is to set up a presidential salaries review committee, which I co-chair with the Minister of Labor. And the idea is for us to streamline those various salary structures, because some of the salaries that are earned within government is really very, very high. And there's no justification for that when you cannot see the commensurate benefits to the nation that is coming from those high salaries. And also, there has to be some kind of fairness and equity within the system. there are some salaries that are very low, and of course, they are the salaries of staff that are in the ministries, departments, and agencies. But some of the non-government, the government-owned enterprises really earn very, very high salaries. So we have a mandate to do this review to see how we can scale down, because the more you pay to staff, or the more you expend in your agency, the less that you are able to remit to the common pool that is supposed to serve all Nigerians. And let's remember that the civil service is about 1% of the 200 million Nigerian population. And we're expending so much just on the service alone. And that's at the detriment to the rest of Nigerians. This is not something that is popular, but it's something that has to be done. Just like removing fuel subsidy is a very difficult decision, but when you look at the benefit of it, and when you look at the benefit to the larger population, that's a decision that we must maintain, and we must make sure actually is implemented. Right now, our negotiation is what do we do in terms of providing succor to people that will be that will be affected by this once the fuel price is now allowed to rise freely. Indeed, there will be hardship. So we're looking, how do we mitigate those hardships to the people that matter, that really need that support.
Okay, before we bring in...
Is there a deadline for your committee's work? The Presidential Committee on Review of...
Not a specific deadline that is given, but we feel the pressure. So we're trying to do this as quickly as possible so that a decision can be taken.
Would there be a balance in salaries from ministries and government-owned enterprises?
Well, what we're trying to do is to do some alignment. That's not to say that the salaries will be equal, but at least we do some adjustments so that the ones that are earning excessively high is reduced. So it's not that you're reducing to add to others. It's you're reducing to reduce the cost of governance.
Okay. Now, before we bring in the other guests, let's bring something you've been discussing currently. You're in talks with state governments on financing safe schools in view of the security challenges across the country. So what is this all about? Can you tell us more about it?
Well, okay, some years back when the abduction of Chibok girls happened, at that time my predecessor, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, was a finance minister. They started with an initiative that is called Safe Schools Initiative, and it was simply to take kids that are in schools that are high risk and put them in schools that are safer. So, and they did that, but it was a small project. It became largely private sector driven. So what we're trying to do now is to really upscale that by making sure that this is covering the whole states of the Federation. Any school that is of high risk, we have to look at how to make it safe. And the solution is not moving children from those schools, but how to secure the school, how to educate not just the students, but the teachers, the school-based management committees, and the community on enhanced security, and also how to invest more in terms of security infrastructure, ICT, and communication in the schools to protect the lives of students in school. The danger, especially in some parts of the country where education level is already low, is that parents will begin to be afraid to send their children to school, and then we will go further backwards from where we are already. It will be a disaster if our children stop going to school.
How can it be funded? How will you get funding?
So what we're doing is federal government will make commitment to some funding, and also we have started reaching out to partners and friends that really want to help, and also some funds are already pledged, and we will be able to raise more once we do the launch, which is tomorrow. We're launching the scheme tomorrow. So for us from the finance side, it's just launching the resources, followed by designing a national plan, which is both federal and state. So we're working with the state governments, and then we will cost those plans and then do a mobilization effort to raise funds for the plan.
Okay, Honorable Minister, once again, we'll return to that subject matter of Safe School Initiative because of the urgency that it now demands on account of the many incidents that we witnessed lately in terms of bandit attacks and kidnappers' assault on school premises. We earlier introduced two other guests who will be part of this conversation, Professor Mike Obadan and Professor Yushua Ango. Ango Prof is in Kano, and Mike Obadan is in Benin. Let's begin with Professor Mike Obadan, who is also a member of the MPCL, the Central Bank. Professor Mike Obadan, listening to the Honorable Minister of Finance, she's put the issues on the table, flat out, no embellishments, nothing. He's told us how the situation is, and unfortunately, there appears to be no full appreciation, as it were, from a number of quarters that these are fairly difficult times, and that we all need to sit up and appreciate what is playing out. But tell us from your own perspective, what is your reading of the nation's economy at this time? We're having pressure on the Naira on the one hand, and then we're also seeing the vast erosion of purchasing power.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. First of all, let me appreciate the Honorable Minister for her candid responses to the issues you have raised. And she has provided, plausible clarifications to some of the recent controversies. The issue of central bank printing, 60 billion naira given to the federation account and then being allocated to states. I had cause a few days ago to explain to, Business Day correspondent that, it's not done that way. And that if the federation account, is short of funds for sharing among the different tiers of government, they probably would have to approach, the central bank through the federal government, through the president, for lending, for ways and means to advance money to them. In which event, once such ways and means advances are provided, then it will be the responsibility of all the three tiers to arrange on how to repay the money. So it's not free money that the central bank will just print and then provide, to the states, and then, they share. It's not done that way. There is a precedent. About 2 or 3 years ago, the states didn't have money to, pay salaries and wages. They were in arrears 6 months to 20-something months. And the president, got the central bank to provide a salary bailout of about 600 billion or thereabout, to the state governments. And it was not free money. Initially, the state governors thought that, it was a grant, it was free. But I think the central bank made it clear that, there is nothing like that. And I understand they've started repaying that money. So this question of 60 billion, the Honorable Minister's explanation is perfect, and I appreciate that one. Well, she's also raised some issue about the cost of governance. Very, very good. The whole question of the fiscal problem. I think, Nigerians need to know that the economy had been in a state of crisis. And given the structural problems of the economy, the dependence on crude oil, virtual dependence on crude oil for revenue, foreign exchange, and once there is a crisis, in the crude oil market, it adversely affects the revenue accruing to the federal government and all the governments, and then even the foreign exchange. So I think she has explained that one, and we need to have a clear understanding, bear that one at the back of our mind. If there is revenue crisis, which there is today, then definitely something will need to be done to maintain some form of level of expenditure. I think that's why expenditure is been going up. I don't want to, be repeating what she has said, but she had made the point that the economy is on the path of stabilization. And I want to say that, yes, that is true, but the growth that has been achieved as at the fourth quarter of 2020 is still very low, very, very fragile. But there are hopes that, things could be better in 2021. But then there are still several vulnerabilities in the economy. Vulnerabilities in the real sector, vulnerabilities in the external sector, and then vulnerabilities in the fiscal sector. Perhaps only in the financial sector, monetary and financial sector, we've seen some semblance of stability, unlike the other three sectors. In the real sector of the economy, we have the issue of low and slow growth I've mentioned. Inflation is rising, and the drivers of the inflation are very clear. We have supply disruptions, arising from, challenges in the food producing areas of the country due to insecurity, and that is very, very critical. There are legacy issues, driving inflation. For example, transport infrastructure problem, for farmers and so on. But I think the major challenge in that area now is how to address the insecurity problem, banditry activities, so that farmers can return, to the farms and be confident to carry on with their activities, and then supply will be boosted so that the supply constraint in that area can be addressed to some extent. And in the manufacturing sector, you find a situation whereby the cost of production is very, very high. And then aggregate demand is low, consumer purchasing power is very, very low. So there are numerous vulnerabilities in the real sector of the economy. Unemployment rate has increased. Youth unemployment, underemployment, and overall unemployment. The average unemployment rate today is 33.70%, which means that there is a huge problem there. And when there is high rate of unemployment, and then you have a large, negative output gap, then the demand for goods and services is very, very limited. In other words, weak purchasing power. And if you go to the external sector, a major challenge in that area, because of the dependence of the economy on crude oil, as the major source of foreign exchange. And with the crisis in the crude oil market last year, foreign exchange earnings dipped very, very strongly. And, production of crude oil also reduced very drastically. I understand it's about 1.4 million barrels per day as the quota advanced. And so foreign exchange inflow is very, very limited. And so, but then, like the Honorable Minister has rightly said, government had already maintained a certain level of expenditure, which it cannot go below. And then the COVID-19 exigencies also required spending more to bring the economy out, of the woods. So you then find a situation that with the weakness in the oil market, both the domestic revenue and foreign exchange have been adversely affected. Then, in light of the crisis, foreign capital has not been flowing into the country as expected. In fact, foreign capital flows had reduced drastically, and then the capital already in the country started reversing, moving back. So you have foreign capital flows reversal. Under the circumstances, what do we have? Increased balance of trade, current account, and balance of payment deficit. And of course, what you refer to, there has been pressure, significant pressure on the foreign exchange market because foreign exchange inflow has reduced drastically. Just permit me to make reference to, some figures of foreign exchange inflow. You'll find that, foreign exchange coming into the country, comes mainly through the oil sector and then the non-oil sector. And of course, you have some autonomous foreign exchange inflows. The figures available show that, in 2020 January, the inflow through the oil sector, through the central bank, was 1,658, billion. And by January 2021, that had reduced to $439.7, million dollars. And what then is the implication of that? That foreign exchange is not flowing into the country as desired. And aggregate foreign exchange inflow, in that period was 17.035 billion in US dollars in January 2020. Then by January 2021, we had just 5.43 billion US dollars. And you see the drastic reduction. Under such circumstance, it's highly surprising that the foreign exchange market is highly under pressure. And the net inflow of foreign exchange has also reduced drastically. For example, the net inflow in January 2020 was 10.14 billion. And then by January 2021, it was only 2.5 billion dollars. So under such circumstance, there has been serious pressure on the foreign exchange market, and then the exchange rate, because demand has kept increasing, but foreign exchange supply has not improved. And at the same time, external reserves have been stable at about 35 billion US dollars. So you then have balance of payments problem, you have foreign exchange market problem. Not because of weakness in public policy, but because of the source of foreign exchange for the country. And then in the fiscal sector, I think the Honorable Minister made some references to activity in that sector. There are also vulnerabilities there. The revenue accruing to the government has been dwindling, as it were. But expenditure had been increasing. The figures which I have show that because of the extraordinary spending, in 2020, in response to the COVID-19 induced economic crisis and the need for increased stimulus to stimulate the economy, the fiscal deficit was as high as about 6.something trillion naira, which had to be financed. If you have a deficit, it must be financed. Government, borrowed part of the financing from, the domestic, market, money capital market, and then the rest it will have to bridge a net deficit. So invariably, Mr. Kingsley, there are numerous vulnerabilities at this point in time. But I think the important question will be, how government is addressing these vulnerabilities. And all indications show some commitment, on the part of government to have a handle on some of these challenges so that the economy in 2021 could be much better than what we saw in 2020.
Professor Mike Abadan, thank you so much for your opening comment this morning. Let's now join Professor Yushau Ango in Kaduna. You've had the opening comment from the Minister and Professor Mike Abadan in Kano. Professor Yushau is in our Kano studio now. And no economy, can move fast without the private sector coming in to bring in their contributions. Can you tell us how the economy has been friendly to the private sector, you know, looking at the indicators, you know, insecurity, we have so many things out there that can sort of hinder the progress of the private sector. How has the economy affected the private sector, and how can we come out of it?
The private sector, like you said, is part of the economy, and particularly this government has been supportive of the private sector. We know, for example, what happened last year because of the challenges of COVID-19. The Economic Sustainability Plan substantially tried in many respects, you know, to address issues and support the private sector, especially the small and medium enterprises, by various supports and funding. In addition, the sustainability plan in particular was built in the sense that as much as possible, whatever can be sourced locally is being sourced or is supposed to be sourced locally. To that extent, I believe the economic policies have been supportive of the private sector. Now, of course, in some respects, the private sector has had to pay more, you know, or at least they have been made to partake in raising additional revenue. For example, the increase in VAT and things like that. Having said this, I also want to look at the issues from the perspective of the submission of the Honorable Minister and Professor and Prof. The reality is that Nigeria cannot be different. We are, right now, we had an international problem, a global problem, and that problem is not just a medical problem, it was an economic problem. It affected every nation virtually, and we cannot be different. What we have been doing, and what I believe the government has been doing, is to try to manage the situation. For us to have come out of recession in the third quarter, as it were, of last year, was commendable itself. And the reality now, whenever there is a recession, there will be a lot of issues that will come out. For example, inflation. Inflation is real, and then for a country like ours that depends so much on importation, which unfortunately not all of it is for productive purposes. Some of it is actually for consumption. There is pressure on the foreign exchange, which Prof said. On one hand, there is pressure that we are not getting as much supply of the foreign exchange because we are depending on a product, and that product was not even in demand for much of last year. And then, like Prof said, the quantum of petroleum that we are able to, or we are allowed to pump, is 1.something million barrels a day. So we have that challenge of foreign exchange coming in, money coming in, but meanwhile our taste, you know, our lifestyle, you know, needs to change. The reality on the ground, if you go around and talk to people, is that inflation is hitting them strongly and seriously. However, what we need to do in terms, I mean, given what government has been doing, you know, in trying to manage this situation, is for us to, first of all, enlighten ourselves, you know. So I think government has to do a lot more in carrying every Nigerian along, in making Nigerians realize that this is a problem, global problem, and this problem is not just a governmental problem, it's everybody's problem. But we need to understand with the times that we are not a very rich country, as is being presumed sometimes. We are also, despite that, we are also facing extra challenges, which are global. So reality is that we need to probably also, in terms of the PR, we need to carry the labor, you know, along. Reality is that labor will continue to agitate because they look at the inflation rate, and given the inflation rate, given the fact that the 30,000 so-called minimum wage cannot even, like they used to say in labor, take home that cannot take you home. That's reality. Fortunately, there are agitations. We have seen agitations from various unions. Recently, the resident doctors. We have seen the judiciary staff. We are likely to see more from others. But let's carry them along. Let them understand that we are really facing challenges. But let them also see that in terms of conduct by government at all levels, that government is also trying, to minimize expenditure that is unnecessary. Expenditure, for example, where governors, for example, will charter planes to go here and there, where overheads are too high. It's not just salary that is high. Let's see from government itself that they are committed, and then let them carry everybody along. Reality is that there is problem. There is a problem that is really, really coming down to the people, but then this is reality. And at the same time, while we are doing this, we should also continue, with infrastructure as much as possible, just like the Honorable Minister said, in terms of ensuring that we bring infrastructure so that the future will be better. If we have better rails, we have better roads, we have port facilities, we have airport facilities, that is the future. So if we are borrowing to support those, especially given the concessionary rates at which we borrow, and I also like the fact from what the Honorable Minister said, in terms of balancing the borrowing, even as much as possible to borrow locally, so as not to go, have this challenge of being affected by foreign exchange flows. I think these are some of the things that we have to do. I think we are really managing the situation, but Nigerians should expect that these are difficult times. They should realize these are difficult times, and we cannot come out of it except everybody contributes his own or her own quota to the issue.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Yushua Ango. You are watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, the conversation continues. The Honorable Minister of Finance is still with us here in the Abuja studios. All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. Let's return to the Honorable Minister of Finance. Honorable Minister, you've of course listened to the responses by the two professors who are with us this morning on this conversation. Professor Mike Obadan was talking about certain vulnerabilities. I want to focus more essentially on the vulnerabilities in the rail sector. Because if you took that aspect and you had a private sector person join us in this conversation, say Muda Yusuf of Lagos Chamber of Commerce Industry, that would be one critical area of focus, namely the pressure of inflation, slow growth, low purchasing power, and therefore low aggregate demand. What is the focus? Of course, we might also add the ease of doing business. The ease of doing business, we've been reminded, isn't just a matter of, say, the ease with which you register a company or register a business name. You don't do that every day. Ease of doing business will be access, of course, to a secure, safe environment, access to good infrastructure, access, of course, also to energy, which is cheap, affordable, and available. So what is the governmental response to these issues that have been identified by Professor Mike Obadan as vulnerabilities? Because for us to have really phenomenal growth, the rail sector has to be in a boom season.
Well, the rail sector, where we are in each of the sectors is different. There are some sectors that are stable. For example, the ICT sector is actually growing. So is the financial sector. The ICT sector, the telecoms businesses, they're actually growing. In fact, they're the reason why the economy came out of recession. And relatively also, the agricultural sector, despite the security, is still also on the growth path. The growth is inching up slowly, not as fast as we want, but it's still growing. The sectors that are really struggling are the manufacturing sector and trade also. But for the manufacturing sector, with the various initiatives that have been undertaken to provide access to finance, low-cost finance with the various intervention funds that Central Bank has provided, with the work that government is doing to enhance the business environment by building out infrastructure that is required for businesses to expend less as a cost to them, it's also one key area. We're also working on how to enhance export business. There is, under the Economic Sustainability Plan, there's a special initiative that is meant to support small and medium-sized businesses that are into exporting any commodity that is going out. And the essence is to begin to push for alternative sources of foreign exchange, alternative to the oil sector. The agricultural sector continues to grow, but we have to, and we're looking at how to enhance that growth. For me, if you ask me if we were to provide any subsidy, it should be subsidy on production, not subsidy on consumption like PMS or light, but on production. So if you subsidize fertilizer, for example, you're actually subsidizing production. You know it's going to go into productive activity. So there's a lot of support to the agricultural sector in terms of access to finance and also in terms of easing the difficulties that farmers are having. Unfortunately, with the heightened incidence of insecurity, it's really having an impact on the agricultural sector. That's one of the things that is really not allowing the agricultural sector to grow at a rate faster than we expect. Is really security, because we've seen farms that simply literally stopped working because they're in areas that are very high risk in terms of security. So the government also has reached out to private sector to support it in terms of either investing in government infrastructure, in infrastructure that government will otherwise have invested, either on a PPP basis or on different types of incentive basis. For example, in the SRGI, we designed a program that we call Road Infrastructure Tax Credit Scheme. So it's a scheme where we encourage investors to use their money to build out roads that government will have built, and then to recover their investment and profit over a period of time from credit, from deduction in credits. One of such roads that is being built is the Apapa road that goes into the port. It's being built by Dangote, also the Bonibodo road, and there are several other roads that Mr. President has approved that investors have elected on their own to build. Most of the time is because they also have some business interests for that road to be constructed. Most of the time they have major factories. The Obajana road that was built by Dangote, of course it was to serve his factory, but it helped because the road is now completed and he's using the road, but so also is all of the industries that are around there. So we continue to develop different instruments to encourage investment by the private sector, freeing government from immediately being able to use its own resources to make these investments. And PPPs have not been very popular in Nigeria, but we're trying to encourage it. People are discouraged simply by the length of time it takes to do a PPP process, but we're reviewing that also to see how it can be made simple for businesses to uptake. But we've seen an uptick of it. In my ministry, for example, we did a PPP with a company that is called 4Core Consultants. They put in place an automated platform for import duty exemption certificate process. So this is a process that we used to, that could take you as a businessman like 3 months to get a waiver to bring ports out of, get your goods out of the ports for sectors that have waivers. So with this automation, you can just spend a few days, you submit your application online and it's processed and you get your certificate online, you print it and you go and do that. So it was the investor that did the investment, rolled out, FAAC approved, that we should go ahead with it, and then they will recover their money over time from the fees that we charge. So there's some like 60,000 naira that is charged for every application that you submit. They recover their money from those fees. So we continue to find such. There's several in every ministry is considering what to do, which of our core function can be partly ceded to private sector so that they can use their own resources to work with government and deploy assets that we need for development.
Okay, one of the constraints to economic potential in this country is the tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade. Bringing to mind the African Free Trade Agreement, how will it affect investors?
Well, the reality is the AfCFTA is here. And we must improve the efficiency of our trade facilitation, otherwise we will lose market share. So what we've been doing is working to improve the efficiency of the customs service. The customs is not supposed to be a revenue generating agency. The revenue generation is just a consequence. Their main mandate is trade facilitation. So we have got FAAC approval to automate all of the customs processes so that an importer and exporter can submit the application in a portal, and you don't have to go to several agencies and submit the same documentation, and it's processed and you have your goods out. The work that my sister Hadiza Bala Usman is doing at the ports with the automation of the trucking system is also helping to improve trade, because it means now you'll be able to predict when your goods come, when you get it out, and all those long queues on the road are relieved, and you get your goods faster. And also the rail lines that is provided from Apapa ports leading out of the airport means cargoes can be moved, not necessarily by truck, but can move by rail to go to other parts of the country. All those things are adding up. They're making businesses easier. We have to compete within the same environment. We have a presidential committee on the AFCFTA to looking at, so it's chaired by the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, and I'm a member. And the Manufacturers Association, NASIMA, they're all members. So we're continuously looking at what we need to do to make sure we get the best advantage of the AFCFTA as a country.
All right. Honorable Minister, tell us, which document governs the management of the economy today? Is it the Economic Sustainability Plan? Is there a successor program to the ERGP, that's the Economic Reconstruction and Growth Plan that you had before, which has since elapsed? And is it the 2021 budget or the 2020 budget? Which document is governing, as I said, as I asked rather, the management of the economy today?
Well, the ERGP has expired in December 2020. We're currently working on a successor to the ERGP, so it's another medium-term plan, but this time for 5 years. The work was supposed to have been completed at the end of March, but unfortunately, with so many disruptions, that has been delayed. I do hope we'll be able to make April for the document to go to public scrutiny, and so that by May it is approved and we'll have that. We also have, at the same time, started a process for a long-term plan. So this is long-term plan is called Nigeria Agenda 2050. So we're working on the two documents side by side. That will be a 50-year development plan. Out of that development plan, we'll take out every 5 years we do a medium-term plan that will be implemented. From the medium-term plan, you take out your annual, your MTEF, the medium-term expenditure framework, which is 3 years, and from the MTEF you draw your budget. So we have an MTEF, we have an annual budget for 2021. We extended the 2020 capital component of the budget beyond December. Why? Because we borrowed money. We provided monies to ministries, departments, and agencies. Because of COVID, implementation of projects was very slow. And we saw a situation whereby in December we were just going to pull back money, and it didn't make sense because the essence of the borrowing was for the monies to be spent for those projects. So we discussed with the Parliament, and they agreed, and the lifespan of the capital component of the 2020 budget was expanded to allow agencies complete their procurement processes and implement the capital budgets. So I hope that in May we'll have a new medium-term development plan, even as we continue to implement the the Economic Sustainability Plan that has a 12 months period. But for the ESP, it will not be difficult to extend the lifespan. When we take stock and we see that there's still more work that needs to be done, because we have resources packed for the ESP, we can also extend it so that the projects can be completed.
So where are we now in the implementation of the ESC?
The ESP?
Yes, ESP, yes.
So we have monthly reviews. For the agricultural sector, you know, there are several sectors. For the agricultural sector, there has been full registration of up to about 5 million farmers. There's a process now to deploy resources to the farmers, either in terms of a combination of working capital as well as inputs, so that, and these are smallholder farmers, they're not large farmers. The public works has started, led by the Ministry of Labor, so that is our youth, 1,000 youths from every local government being put to physically work. So it could be road construction, it could be cleaning of drainages, it could be agricultural extension workers, different categories depending on the local government and what their need is. The power sector, the solar power sector component, which is energy to homes, has also started, and there has already been deployment of solar home systems. Those are private sector driven, so we partnered with private sector. They invested in buying these solar home systems that will be sold to homes, and people for the first time that never had light actually have lights in their homes that they can use for just either household use or for small trades and businesses. The social housing program component, we've at the final stages of securing a 200 billion naira package with CBN, which required a Ministry of Finance guarantee, so that the building of those 300,000 houses can now start. The developers will be supported with low-cost financing, the ones that need the financing, anyone that has his own financing and can use their own funds to do that, but the ones that need can apply into that fund, get the financing, build the houses, and then the houses are uptaken and sold to the public under mortgage schemes.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Finance. Let's return to our Benin Network Center and bring in again Professor Mike Obadan. Professor Mike Obadan, one issue that is often up for debate has to do with the quantum of loans that Nigeria already has taken, whether at the subnational level or at the national level. Yes, we hear from time to time that we haven't breached the threshold, that it's still the ratio of our debt to GDP is still quite comfortable. But there are concerns, as I indicated, about sources of generating revenue to repay those loans. Yes, we see infrastructure all over the place, but what's your take on this? Because some commentators do say that there appears to be no clear-cut plan, and that's why we continue to have what appears to be huge debt servicing burdens on us. If you could be brief, Prof, that would be appreciated. I know it's a tough one, but go ahead.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. You hit the nail on the head. It's a tough issue, if not controversial. Let me say this, that my advice would be that the government from now on should be a bit more careful in acquiring new loans. What the country has at the moment in terms of debt stock is on the burdensome side, in terms of the revenue required to service the loans, both external and domestic debt. Yes, the Honorable Minister is correct, that the debt to GDP ratio at about 23–24% is still on the sustainable side. But like I've argued at public fora, in Nigeria's circumstance, debt to GDP ratio is not helpful in our case, in Nigeria's case. There are many other countries that have much higher debt to GDP ratio, but they don't have the kind of debt burden, debt crisis that Nigeria is experiencing. Nigeria's debt may be sustainable considering its relationship with the gross domestic product. But it is not sustainable when you relate, the debt to revenue or the debt service to revenue. Debt service, as at this point in time, gobs a large chunk of Nigeria's revenue, which means that, only little, as it were, is left to meet development needs of the country. And therefore, my humble suggestion is this: let us see how we manage the stock that we have at this point in time, while the government is implementing, measures to grow revenue so that the burden becomes less. I think if we do that one, if we hit that one, then we should not, rush anymore to accumulate more debt. Otherwise, the impact, on future generations will be quite, significant.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Mike Obadan. Let's now join Professor Yushau Ango in Kano, and let's have his closing comment briefly. How can we move out of the present situation we are now in this country economically, and how can it grow to, for investors to grow and contribute their quota to national development itself? With all the
Well, one way, and I think we have started, is to ensure that we patronize Nigerian products as much as possible. We patronize Nigerian businesses. Like I said earlier, we need to carry everybody along. We are going through a difficult journey. Everybody needs to understand that. I do not subscribe, to the idea that we should not take debt, any more loans, but if it's infrastructure, for me, we need this infrastructure to push the economy. We need it, to grow the economy, to even grow the revenue that we're expecting. But most importantly, I want our lifestyle, the way we conduct ourselves, we have to realize that we don't have as much, and we have such enormous quantity. We should ensure that in carrying out governmental activities, we reduce costs minimally as much as possible, and realize that the cost is not just in salaries, it's sometimes in overheads. So it's not in reduction of labor or people, laying off people. So that is the way. I think the best way is to patronize ourselves, is to utilize Nigerian products, is to support Nigerian products, and is to make Nigerians realize that things are difficult, and they are difficult everywhere, but we need to come out of this. I will subscribe, to complete stoppage, because it's not an option. We have a country that is growing in population. We have needs, we have infrastructural needs which need to be plugged. So if we need to borrow to support those infrastructural facilities, we should borrow to support those facilities. But I think in terms of day-to-day things that we do, in terms of overheads, we can reduce those, and we need to carry every Nigerian along. We need to make people understand, and our conduct, or by the conduct of our leaders, we can be better appreciative of the reality of things, and then support the government in the drive towards improved economy.
All right, Professor Yushau Ango, thank you very much for your closing thoughts. Honorable Minister, well, we recognize that this is a global economic crisis that is on the heels of the pandemic, that's the coronavirus pandemic. But China, the source of the pandemic in the first instance, and Q1, that's the first quarter of 2021, posted a humongous growth of 18.3%. There must be some magic there, some things to learn from them. So what are your closing thoughts for us here in Nigeria?
For me, in Nigeria, we must work to rebuild fiscal buffers so that when a crisis happens, we're able to withstand the crisis without being thrown into huge deficits that we have found ourselves. So we must, to build fiscal buffers, we must do a lot of reforms. within the trade sector, within the physical sector, even within the monetary sector, to be able to save for that rainy day.
All right. On that note, we'd like to appreciate you, Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Hajiya Zainab Ahmed. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks
it's
a lot.
always a pleasure being here.
All right. Thank you. From Benin, we were joined by a Professor of Economics and member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank, Professor Mike Obada. Thanks for your insights. And from Kano, we were joined by Professor Yushua Ango, who is a Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Dean of School of Postgraduate Studies, Kaduna State University. Professor Ango, a delight once again for your thoughts. So that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We are back tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. Until then, take care of yourself. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Jumoy Yusuf. Do have a great day.